I am a firm believer that climate change is real, that it is impacted by human behavior and carbon emissions. And as a consequence, I think we've got an obligation to future generations to do something about it.
The greatest threat to U.S. national security today is climate change, as this issue increases instability in critical regions of the world. Since we are not fully independent and rely on others for our oil, their instability has a great impact on us. As human beings, we are not only impacted, but we also contribute greatly to this threat in various ways. For example, we use electricity that emits carbon into the atmosphere, and we fail to make the conscious effort to recycle things that could easily be reused.
As both parties agree, in order to decrease the effects of climate change, we must diversify our energy supply and increase our energy efficiency. The choices that we make regarding our energy can have either a positive or negative effect on our economic strength. It's our decision. To decrease dependence on fossil fuels, we must take drastic actions to support clean energy technology, as this will allow for positive changes in the environment. Political parties aside, we must all agree that when it comes to the clean energy race, because the need for urgent action is indisputable, second place is unacceptable.
What is security?
Security is the protection of resources.
Where do resources come from?
They come from the environment.
However, the links between climate change and security still do not get sufficient attention.
The changing global climate will pose profound strategic challenges to the United States in the coming decades, raising the prospect of military intervention to deal with the effects of violent storms, drought, mass migration, and pandemics, military and intelligence analysts say.
Today, national security is interdependent with international security.
India's water demand is expected to double by 2025.
China, a country with more than 22% of the world's population, has only 8% of its fresh water.
The Middle East's freshwater availability is expected to drop by 50% before 2025.
Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone?
As science has been telling us for over 2 decades, the planet is warming due to a great increase in concentrations of heat-trapping gases in our atmosphere. The majority of the increases of these gases over the last century is caused by human activities, specifically deforestation and the burning of fossil fuels. The first 12 years of this century are among the 14 warmest years on record.
The danger surrounding climate change is real. This matter, both urgent and severe, must be addressed. The changes wrought by a warming planet will cause conflict over resources and refugees. It will lead to great suffering from things such as drought, famine, natural disasters, and the degradation of land across the globe. This change in climate may act as an accelerant of instability or conflict, placing burden to respond on civilian institutions and militaries around the world. It will exacerbate and accelerate the pre-existing economical, social, and political tensions in a region.
Fortunately, because of wealth, the United States has been able to react to these changes. However, many developing countries have not had the same advantage. The lack of consistency in the weather causes both drought and famine, which eventually leads to food shortages. As if that wasn't bad enough, water scarcity and the natural competition for resources are both intensified by the rural to urban migration of those whose lives have been affected by the extremities in the weather.
Not only will these instabilities likely stretch domestic humanitarian and aid resources, but also the U.S. military in the struggles to maintain social, political, and economic stability in affected regions. As a result, the U.S. could be pressured to take in migrants fleeing from the environmental degradation, which will create a burden for the U.S. to assess how capably it could address issues such as food scarcity, internal migration, sea level rise, and water scarcity at home, in addition to addressing these issues abroad.
Although it is clear that the United States has much at risk as the global climate change continues to alter social, political, and economic conditions around the world, it appears that there is very little urgency to address this issue. If we do not act now, but instead we wait until scientists are completely sure of their conclusions before we take action, we might as well take no action at all. Scientists can never come to an exact conclusion because in science you can only disprove things, not prove them.
While natural causes always play a role in the climate change, they are now being overwhelmed by human-induced changes. There is a debate around the world regarding the impact of human activity on climate change. Since economic prosperity is correlated with energy use and the greenhouse gas emissions, it is often argued that economic progress leads to climate change. However, the competing evidence suggests that climate change can occur regardless of human activity, as seen in climate events that have happened prior to modern society. Regardless of the cause, if the United States wants to protect its national security and promote international stability, actions must be taken and more must be done.
The recreation of special advisors to the president with actual budgetary authority would go a long way to driving interagency coordination and ensuring more coherence between the national security pieces of this problem and those related to energy and environmental protection. On a risk-return basis, which means that a concept improves an investment's return by measuring how much risk is involved in producing that return, energy efficiency in the economy represents one of the greatest money-making opportunities of all time. Billions and billions of dollars from companies are waiting to be invested in energy efficiency. The government's efforts should begin by providing incentives for individuals and firms to reduce risk, particularly through building codes and ensuring that federally funded disaster insurance discourages dangerous coastal settlements. The latter could be carried out, for example, by limiting government guarantees to rebuild homes and infrastructure that are situated in vulnerable places.
Our U.S. national security leaders believe that accelerating pace of climate change will place severe strains on the U.S. military and intelligence agencies in the coming years. This is because, according to the National Research Council, the U.S. top scientific body, climate changes will trigger increasingly disruptive developments around the world. Commissioned by the CIA and other U.S. intelligence services, a 206-page National Research Council study concludes that states will fail, large populations subjected to famine, flood, or disease will migrate across international borders, and neither national nor international agencies will have the capacity or the resources to cope with the resulting crises.
While terrorist attacks certainly threaten our security, natural disasters do more damage than a terrorist attack ever could. The most costly disruptions, such as those that result from our disrespect for the environment, always happen when something we take completely for granted stops working. Without the environment, we are nothing.